Welcome back to Coast Sports, the only show for the fans, by the fans. I'm Michael Fiumefreddo, and Merry Christmas Eve. That's right, 2 days till the great holiday, and I've been getting a lot of gifts this past week, starting off with the fact that I got two very special guests in the studio. We'll ring the bell for them. Danny Vaccaro and Brant Mandia came in to watch the show live. But other than that, this week's been big in the sports world, starting off with the NBA's back. And now we got a lot of games going on. We started off with two great ones yesterday. The Brooklyn Nets debuted KD and Kyrie on the court together for the first time. And they won in a pretty big blowout of the Golden State Warriors. Kevin Durant put up 22 points, and the Nets won 125-99. Following that up, the Lakers and LeBron James received their rings for winning the championship just 2 months ago. And their celebration was kind of spoiled by the LA Clippers, the crosstown rivals, who won 116-109. But that's how the season started off last year as well. So deja vu a little bit. Speaking of starting the season the same way, my Dallas Mavericks are taking on the Phoenix Suns to start off the year again. And Danny walked in with his Knicks sweatshirt. That's because they got a game tonight. They're taking on the Indiana Pacers. So NBA season's back, the gift that keeps on giving, and Christmas Day games this year look pretty good as well. Speaking of some games on the holidays, the College Football Playoff Committee finally came out with their top four who's going to be playing for the national championship this year. We got the Rose Bowl being played in Texas this year rather than Pasadena, California, and it's Alabama going to be taking on Notre Dame, who lost in the ACC championship to Clemson, who will be taking on Ohio State in the Sugar Bowl, which will be in New Orleans. Both those games are going to be on New Year's Day. But with every Christmas season, there's got to be a Grinch. And for me, that was the fact that I had the worst football weekend of my life. Starting with the fact that my fantasy team, the Moneymakers, were already out of the playoffs, so they couldn't even give me some hope, get me into another championship. Speaking of, this is actually 2 days ago to the day was when I won the championship in fantasy football, the Money League. They're looking at me over there, both of them. Never been in the championship, either one of them. So they're a little jealous of me over here. But other than that, USC, the Trojans, I talked about that game going up against Oregon in the Pac-12 championship. They lost on Friday. Really bad game for them, no excuses there. And it looks like they're opting out of bowl season as well, so we won't even have at least one more game to bask in the glory of being a USC Trojan football fan. And the worst of all, and it was a win too, the New York Jets, the goddamn Jets over here, beat the LA Rams, who should have been an upset game. They should have been 0-14. Now they lost the number one pick. So leave it up to the Jets, who don't even know how to tank right, to lose out on Trevor Lawrence just because they won a game. But, you know, everyone's got to think, where do they go from here now? They got the number 2 pick. Jacksonville's probably going to lose out, try to get Trevor Lawrence the best they can. But I got a plan. And GM Joe Douglas called me the other day and said, hey, I want you to come up with a plan for the offseason. Like, what are we going to do? So here we go. I devised my New York Jets 2020 offseason plan. And you can see right at the top, you got to fire Adam Gase. And I think this one's a no-brainer. It's going to happen on Black Monday. Greg Williams is already gone. So I think that's the first move. It's going to bring a culture change to the Jets. I don't think a lot of the players really liked Adam Gase anyway. But now you got a head coaching spot to fill. And I think the guy best for the job is Joe Brady out of Carolina, the offensive coordinator. And the reason I like him, he's young. He's the same age Sean McVay was when he was hired by the LA Rams a few years ago. I really liked what he did in Carolina with all the hardships he had to face there. Teddy Bridgewater, new quarterback. Christian McCaffrey was out for most of the year. So I really liked what he did. I think he did a great job revolutionizing that offense and really getting them to win some games. Guys like Mike Davis stepped up. Teddy Bridgewater showed he could really be a starting quarterback in the league for a few years now. And I think Joe Brady's kind of being overlooked as well. You know, you talk about guys like Greg Roman, the offensive coordinator in Baltimore, Brian Daboll out of Buffalo, and Eric Bieniemy, the highly touted guy for a few years now in Kansas City. Those guys are really being looked at as the best of the best. And I don't think the Jets right now are going to hire the best of the best just because there's more appealing jobs out there. You know, I look at Houston, they got Deshaun Watson, a franchise quarterback. A lot of guys on that offense that can play. Same with Atlanta. Matt Ryan's towards the end of his career, but you still got Julio Jones performing at his best. Calvin Ridley, you just brought in Todd Gurley, former Offensive Player of the Year. So I think those jobs are a little more enticing to guys like Eric Bieniemy, who's going to leave the Chiefs after winning a Super Bowl last year and maybe even another one this season. And just other guys like Brian Daboll and Greg Roman, who are playoff mainstays at this point. And then you got a guy like Joe Brady, who just came in even as the offensive coordinator, looking for a head coaching job at a young age. I think this is a pick the Jets can't mess up. And speaking of picks, coming into February, you got to decide what to do with this number 2 overall pick if we end up having it. Now, there's a lot of moves you can do here. Is a team willing to move up for a quarterback? That's the main question. There's a lot of guys in that 4 through 10, maybe even 11 to 12 that could be looking to get a quarterback. But we saw last year that Tua Tagovailoa, the Dolphins didn't have to move up to get him. Justin Herbert went at 6 as well. So maybe these guys are going to stay tight where they are and not risk giving up a boatload of picks just to get a quarterback. And the Jets end up keeping that number 2 pick. Or do you end up taking Justin Fields with that pick and moving on from Darnold or build everything else? You got 5 picks within the first 3 rounds of the draft. I think that's the best option. You stay there, let the draft rock, and we'll see what we can do there. But you have to decide this now, and that's because you need to be aggressive in free agency. And that brings me to part 3 of my 4-step process. If you're going to stick with Darnold or move on from quarterback, you still got a lot of holes to fill with $81 million in cap space. Now, this is the NFL. It's not the stock market. You can't just let $81 million sit there and let it grow over time. You have to spend this money now before you have to spend it anywhere else. And the first part of this, you have to lock up Marcus May, your safety, and arguably the best player on the defense this season. He hasn't been as vocal about leaving the team as Jamal Adams was earlier in the season. And I think he's a guy that might want to be here. He might want to stay a Jet for at least the next portion of his career. And you got the money to pay him, so why not? But then you also got to look for some other guys out of house and go around the league looking for some stars. We're a big market team in New York. So I think you got to look for some guys, especially pass rushers. Now, there's a lot of them that are going to be available. A couple veterans, Levante David out of Tampa, Jadeveon Clowney, who we tried to get last season, but didn't really pan out. Bud Dupree, Yannick Ngakoue is a free agent. Matthew Judon played very well this season. And then you got Shaquille Barrett, who's coming off a breakout season a year ago. So those are some guys that I think the Jets should definitely look at coming into free agency. And even you could look at cornerbacks as well, but there's guys like Richard Sherman out there that are a lot older, and I don't think they want to make that same mistake that they did two years ago with Tremaine Johnson. So you might want to stay away from cornerbacks and maybe focus on the draft. But the big signing that most Jets fans really want is Allen Robinson. And he's a guy that's been vocal about leaving Chicago. He probably wants a lot more money than he's being paid right now. And he's a guy that really, when he's a number 1 receiver, we've seen it in Jacksonville, we've seen it now in Chicago. He's a guy that can really step in an offense and show off. So I think he's definitely one of the best options for us, considering you got guys like Godwin, who are probably going to stay in Tampa, Juju Smith-Schuster, same thing in Pittsburgh, Kenny Golladay as well in Detroit. So I think you got a guy that's looking to get out of there, and he could be that guy that comes in for the Jets and really helps them out at wide receiver. But there's just too many holes to fill on this team, and I think offensive line is definitely a big one. So I think with that, you move into the draft, you stay away from the offensive line in free agency because you signed so many last year, but you focus on the offensive line in the early rounds of the draft. Now, when I say early rounds of the draft, I mean you have 3 picks in the first 2 rounds. Maybe use 2 of them on offensive line. Now, you got a guy, Mekhi Becton, last year who's becoming a great player for the team, definitely one of the best offensive linemen they have right now. But at number 2, a lot of mock drafts are saying they take Penei Sewell out of Oregon, a tackle. 6'6", 315. Imagine him on one side and Becton on the other. I think that's all the protection Darnold would need. But then you got other guys on the interior that you got to fill. Maybe you could use it with the Seattle pick or early second-round pick. Guys like Wyatt Davis out of Iowa, Trey Smith out of Tennessee, and Creed Humphrey out of Oklahoma are just names that come available for me. And if you're worried about maybe saying like, oh, you got so many holes, if I focus on one with like 2 or 3 picks, think about what they did a couple of years ago. They drafted Jamal Adams in the first round and then followed it up with Marcus May in the second. So it's possible that they can really go that route again and just make a big offensive line for Sam Darnold next season, or maybe even the future if they plan on sticking with him after that. And then finally, I've noticed a trend during all Jets drafts is that you got that first pick. They usually great pick. Mekhi Becton last year, Jamal Adams, guys that just come in, maybe even the second-round pick as well. Very good job there. But then you get to the later rounds, and you got these guys that don't even make the team. They're normally on the practice squad. So that's why with the last spot, number 4, you have to focus on nailing those later rounds of the draft. You can't just ignore them and fill guys for putting in camp. You got to really get a guy that in the 3rd round, the 4th round, that can really play. And I think if you're going to focus on the offensive line in those first rounds, you're missing out on Jamar Chase, Devontae Smith, and some of the top receivers in the draft. I think about guys like DK Metcalf that even fell to the 3rd round. Denzel Mims was a late pickup for the Jets. He fell. Many people thought him would be in the 1st round. I think you got guys that, especially in wide receiver land, Chuba Hubbard's another name that comes to mind, the running back. Amon-Ra St. Brown even. You know, maybe if he falls, that would be nice. But you definitely want to pick those skill positions in the later rounds if you're the New York Jets. Now let's shift gears back to some of the college level. I know we're talking about the draft. That's still months away. We got plenty of time before we can really get into the nitty-gritty of that. But like I mentioned, the College Football Playoff Committee came out with their top 4, the teams that are going to be playing. And I know I criticized them last week, but after this conference championship week, I think they got it right. You know, it's hard to argue when a team like Clemson, who beats the number 2 team and wins an ACC championship, gets that number 2 spot. You got Alabama, who's played tremendous all year. They definitely deserve the number 1 spot. Ohio State, same thing, undefeated, although they played a few less games. They're sitting at 3. And then Notre Dame, I think they beat Clemson earlier in the year when they were number 1. So even if their one loss is to that team in the ACC championship, you can't count them out, especially when the other 2 Power 5 champions only had 2 losses each. But the reason I criticized them so much was really because I didn't see them giving a lot of teams opportunities. It was more, you know, the eye test was really the biggest part of it. So I know I've been talking about the college football playoff a lot and how they should expand it. People are saying 6 teams, 8 teams. So I devised a completely opportunity-based chaos bracket that I think the College Football Playoff Committee should consider. And here are the rules we got for it. So like I said, we're embracing the chaos. It's going to be 12 teams. All the New Year's 6 bowls become playoff games. Now this is opportunity-based. We're getting in based off your record. Not so much how much you win by. A win is a win, a loss is a loss. But also who you play and how you look on that game, that's really more the eye test. I think that could come in to really decide where to rank the people. But it really wouldn't matter because the first round matchups are going to be chosen at random. And what that means is, you know, the 1 seed's not going to play the 12 seed. It's going to get all randomized. The 1 seed could end up playing the 5 seed, and then like the 12 seed might play the 9 or the 10. And it just gives those teams opportunities. You're not playing this whole season to get into a 12-team playoffs just to get whooped by Bama in the first round by making it with the skin of your teeth. I actually want to give some teams shots. Let them get in, let them get a warm-up game in maybe, and pull off an upset against a weaker team, and then maybe face some other guys, get the momentum going. But I think what also goes into that is your record rather than your games played, games lost. I say if you lose more than one non-conference game or more than 2 conference losses during the regular season, you're pretty much looking at elimination. I don't think no team has ever made it with more than 1 loss anyway. So if we're adding more teams, why not just add a 3rd loss or so? And what I mean by the regular season for the conference championship games is, you can't, like, take Florida for example. They lost 2 games, still made the SEC championship, lost that. They have 3 losses, but it really wouldn't be fair to kick them out when a team that doesn't play in the conference championship also has 2 losses. You got what I'm saying there? Going back to this, after those first 2 rounds of the playoffs, after that first round of the randomized games, you go to the second rounds with 6 teams, and that's when it becomes the NFL playoffs, kind of, or what it was last year, with 2 teams getting the bye of the 2 higher seeds. Could be the 1 and the 2, could be the 1 and like the 5, could be a 3 and a 4. You don't know how the 1 and 2 seeds are always going to perform, but basically, whoever has the highest 2 seeds, they're playing they get the first round bye. The highest remaining seed plays the lowest remaining seed. The 2 middles play, and then just think of the NFL playoffs, but in college. And I think it would be pretty fun. Just a lot of chaos. Teams might pull off upsets, and we're not going to see the same 4 teams every year. I think that's the biggest knock on the college football playoffs is how many. I think Alabama's made it every single season, and they haven't always won the SEC. They didn't even make the SEC championship 1 year. So this is what it would look like if the college football playoffs said, you know what, Michael, you're right. We're going to switch it for this year and this year. Starting now, this is what the teams are going to be for the 12-team playoff. So, and if you notice, the rankings are even a little bit different than what they are in normal. So you got Alabama, number 1. Ohio State's the only other undefeated Power 5 champion, so they're number 2. They jumped Clemson, who had 10-1 ACC champion. I kept Notre Dame at 4. I think they have a much more convincing schedule than Cincinnati. Like I said, the eye test kicks in at some points. Then I gave Oklahoma the 6th seed, coming in at 8-2 and the Big 12 champion. Texas A&M, they'll get in at number 7 at 8-1 since their opportunity wasn't there to play in the SEC championship, but they still make it in. Oregon won the Pac-12, so they get a little bit of a boost. Coastal Carolina, I could have moved up a little bit to where Cincinnati was or put them at number 6, but their championship game was canceled. They still went 11-0, so I put them in there. Florida, like I mentioned, they get to make it because their 3rd loss is in the SEC championship, and they still were the runner-up. And that's where teams like USC and Northwestern, who ended up had great seasons all year, they just lost the conference championship games. And then on the bottom, I got the missed cut. Georgia, unlike Texas A&M, they did have 2 losses, so I had to keep them out. Iowa State had 2 losses, and I think Northwestern and USC deserved it more, considering Iowa State lost to Louisiana Lafayette, a non-conference game against a weaker opponent. Indiana as well, the opportunity wasn't there, and BYU lost to Coastal Carolina earlier in the year, and I think that's what knocked them out. So, I don't know. I think it would be interesting. What do you guys think?
I agree.
Brant's nodding his head. That's the first time I've talked about this with him, and he's actually kind of agreed with me. There he is. And then you got
Junior, one of the cooler cats around.
yeah, and then you got Danny over there wearing his Knicks jersey.
You're over here. Let's get a little yeah.
Anyway, we put a mic on the audience table. The peanut gallery. Guys, you got any comments on anything that I've said so far today?
I'm not the football guy. Where do you want us to start, Mike?
Whenever you want to start talking.
You want the Jets or you want the college football playoff first?
Let's start with the Jets.
Well, first with the head coaching pick, I love the Joe Brady option. I know a lot of people want Lincoln Riley or someone from college, but I don't think that's realistic. And I like your point with McVay. He's around the same age as him, offensive-minded coach, similar projection with the Rams.
Yeah, and Dan, what about you? What do you think of a guy like Jim Harbaugh though, coming out of Michigan?
No, I don't like him. I like the Joe Brady option too. That's a good one because he's a very offensive-minded guy. Jets need a guy who's more offensive-oriented. There's always been talk about the Jets' defense being top in the league. They fell this year, but I feel like we need a more offensive-oriented guy to drive this team to score a little more points because the defense holds their own most of the time. It's the offense that has the problem.
Yeah, and let's look ahead to the draft, though. I was saying we got to focus on the offensive line a little bit more, but I know we've been talking a lot in our group chat about guys like Devontae Smith, Jamar Chase. So what do you think would be the better option, going with an offensive lineman like Sewell out of Oregon, or maybe dropping back and taking Jamar Chase or Devontae Smith?
Well, there are a lot of wide receivers in this draft, so maybe we can get one with the second first-round pick that the Seahawks gave us. So if we take Sewell with that first pick, which would be number 2, Bengals fans would probably be very upset with that because I know they were hoping to get him at 3. And because our biggest thing is Darnold hasn't been able to live up to his potential because he hasn't had time to make plays. So you got Becton over there. He's been having a hell of a season. Should have made the Pro Bowl, led the tackles in fan votes, and he still didn't get in. Don't know how that happened. But you get another tackle on the other side. We go out, we could maybe sign another guard or two. And that's the biggest thing. We got to protect Darnold. And then maybe go get somebody like Allen Robinson or draft somebody in the later rounds. Devontae Smith won't probably fall as much, but there are other guys.
Yeah, and definitely. I was looking at some of the mock drafts earlier, though. Dan, do you think a guy like Devontae Smith would fall, or do you think they could take another guy?
Alabama wide receiver. He's probably going to win the Heisman.
He's winning the Heisman.
Oh, okay. Well, I see personally. I think we need a receiver because we just got Becton. Obviously, he's only holding down one side of the line, but I feel like we really need a receiver who's going to be able to run routes and get open because we do know that Sam Darnold doesn't have a lot of time in the pocket, but when he does, he doesn't have anyone to throw the ball to.
Yeah.
Rashad Perriman and Jamison Crowder have been dealing with injuries all year, so. I mean, it comes down.
Like Braxton Berrios, though.
He's a fast guy out of the flex, but it comes down to a guy that can run routes. And you were talking about Allen Robinson before, who I really like because he's been a stud on not one but 2 teams, and he had the Bears at 5-0 in the beginning. They tanked, but I mean, it just comes down to guys that can get open. So Sam Darnold could finally look like the quarterback that he was at Mikey's school, USC.
Yeah, and let's go back to college now because. You've heard me say this scenario multiple times, and every time you call me a little bit crazy, and I like being crazy, but here I'll put it back up for the people at home.
Being crazy?
You are crazy.
You work for me. You like being crazy.
I'm saying you work for me. I'm not crazy. Why would you be crazy?
John Tobacco is Dr. John Tobacco is the most.
Hey, he doesn't like when people call him fake doctors anymore.
Yeah. I'm a fake doctor.
Yeah.
I'm a proctologist.
But anyway,
I clean your asshole out.
So, I mean, you guys seem to have agreed with
a gynecologist. I'm a
But yeah, today I kind of broke it down a little bit more, and you guys seem to kind of agree with it. What do you think about my college football playoff proposal?
I think the biggest thing is whether it's 12, 8, or 6 teams, you need some kind of expansion. Last year was the first year Alabama didn't make it. I think Ohio State has had 1 year where they didn't make it. Same thing with Clemson. You're kind of getting the same teams over and over again. Like the great thing about football is they say any given Sunday or any given Saturday. But lately in college football, it's just been kind of the same top dogs. And if you expand it, you can get some new teams in there, some fresh faces. And the great thing about college football is the fan bases. So you get a new fan base in Cincinnati to show off their pride. Maybe they can pull up an upset. And
Even though there are no fans right now.
Well, yes, but that'll be down the line.
Yeah, I think you just need an opportunity for it to, even if you do expand it, think about the rankings this year. You had teams like Texas A&M at 5. So if you expanded it to 6, they would have gotten in. There would have been 2 SEC teams. Florida, you could even make a case for. That would have been 3 SEC teams. Georgia's up in the rankings, 4 SEC teams.
Oklahoma.
Oklahoma's at Big 12.
Not SEC, but I
But
feel
Iowa
like
State was up there too.
I feel like Oklahoma is the most deserving team out of the guys that didn't get in, honestly, because they had a crazy year this year. And
Well, they had 2 losses.
They did. They did. I know. And that's when it gets to the point where you expand it to 6 and 8, you can have guys that have 2 losses in there that played 2 top 5, top 10 teams, lost both, but still have the potential to win.
Yeah.
So that's where you need to really figure out. You want 6 teams, you want 8 teams. That's when you can add the two lost teams into there and make it a little more interesting.
And even when you're adding the 2 lost teams, you got to consider really limiting the amount of the SEC teams. You can't have like 5 SEC teams, and then you got a team like Cincinnati who wins the AAC, a group of 5 team with an undefeated record, and you're going to leave them out. So I think you need a system that's going to open the door for the little men, the group of 5 teams, and then really close the door for the eye test of people saying like, oh, well, SEC guys, Tennessee's playing like the best teams. They should still get in over a team like Cincinnati. So I think that's really what it comes down to. But we do have a big matchup in the friend group right now. The Money League Championship. You got Brandon in it for the fourth time out of 5 years.
I hate it.
Going up against newcomer Mike O'Brien. So what do you guys think about this? Danny, you're very vocal about Brandon being in again. So what do you got to say to that?
We need a new guy to win, and it's never going to be me because I stink at fantasy football.
Well, you came in second last year.
I did.
So
it's true, but still, I am rooting for anyone but Brandon, and Brandon is my roommate and one of my best friends, but I want him to lose so badly.
Does he like boys or girls?
What?
Does he like boys or girls?
It's controversial.
wow.
Just kidding.
Breaking news.
Breaking news. This just in.
Brandon's coming on Saturday morning to discuss his matchup.
Is
but
he
Brant, what do you think about the matchup? I know me and you were both in the playoffs.
Michael Bryan's the favorite.
What do you think? Do you think this should have been us two in this matchup?
I mean, I was really angry with myself. I had T.Y. Hilton and Miles Sanders on my bench in my first round matchup. And I had them starting the day of. I took them both out. They both scored 20-plus points. The 2 guys I replaced them for were under 10. And if I would have had either one of them in, I would have been moving on. So it's been – I know sometimes fantasy, it's any given week, and you can't really do anything if your team kind of doesn't perform. But that one it's been kind of hard to live with, the fact that one was on me, and I kind of choked that one.
Yeah, I'm trying to find the message you sent me as the game's going on when Miles Sanders just went off on Sunday night the other day, and you're like, the day I bench Miles Sanders, of course he's got to do something like that. But my team, we did flop. We had a lot of injuries going into the last week of the season.
Excuses.
Stop making excuses.
Hey,
come on.
I had the second most points in the league though. And, Phil put on a great show. He's obviously not there, but good luck to the both of them.
Landed a blind, the one-eyed man is king.
But that's all the time we got for today. We had a great show. I want to thank Danny, Brant, and JT for staying. Let's give him one more shot on camera.
Give him a shot.
Thank you for having me, Mike.
Yeah. Max Public House, baby.
I'm not even capable of being behind the camera.
You're doing good, though.
I'm such a camera hog that I want to be in front of it.
You're doing good.
I got all these young men with voluminous heads of hair that I have to put them
Well,
on.
JT, on Newsmax the other day, your hair looked great.
Oh, Dave.
You got it. I say whoever did the hair that day, whatever her pay is at Newsmax, you got to double it.
It was
double.
Unbelievable. I was like, I
Like
felt
Rapunzel,
so good.
like
I'm looking
Rapunzel.
at myself. I'm looking at myself on TV while I'm talking. I'm like, damn, I gotta do my hair like this every day. They put all kinds of lotions and potions in there. They're sprinkling things on, spray painting it. I'm like,
It's like they were making a gingerbread house on Johnny's head.
Say that again, dude.
It's like they were making a gingerbread house on Johnny's head.
That was good, man. Thanks. You didn't inherit your father's sense of humor. Funny.
All right. Well, that's going to do it for today's show. I
Thanks,
hope everyone
Mikey.
has a very happy and safe holiday. We'll catch up with you on Saturday after Christmas Day. We're going to talk to Brandon and maybe Mike O'Brien. They're going to both come in. We're going to talk about their fantasy matchup and what they think of each other's going into this. So until then, have a Merry Christmas. Once again, I'm Michael Fiumefreddo. You're watching Coast to Coast Sports, the only show
For the fans, by the
fans. Have a Merry Christmas, everybody.